definitely in the running for one of my favorite albums of 2021 so far. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Molly, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Cinema, the newest album from the indie pop band the Marías. So this album is quite new. It was released on June 25th, 2021. I've only listened to it a couple of times, but I can honestly say it far exceeded my expectations. The singles that the Marías dropped leading up to the release of this album, I liked. I really got into them, but the sound of the album really surprised me compared to the tracks that they released as singles. There's just a great dreamy, atmospheric quality to this whole album, so I figured I would make this little video just to talk about how much I like Cinema by the Marías. So Cinema opens with track 1, Just a Feeling, which is an instrumental track. It's pretty short, I think it's a little over a minute long, and it's just a very warm sounding, sweeping song. It kind of envelops you in this instrumental acoustic sound, and it almost kind of sounds like a curtain rising at the beginning of a show. That's what it reminded me of anyway. And just a nice little opening track to kind of set the tone for the whole album and kind of give you an idea of what the album's going to sound like. Track 2 is Calling You Back. This is one of my favorites on this whole album. It's a little bit more upbeat, and I absolutely love how Calling You Back starts with like this really sharp bark sound right at the beginning of the track. And going from the first track, Just a Feeling, into track 2, it just snaps you to attention. Like it really catches your attention sonically. But yeah, Calling You Back is definitely one of the more up-tempo tracks on this album. I also love the blending of male and female vocals too on this track. I think that's kind of interesting and it works well. But yeah, it just provides a great contrast of sound between the kind of dreamy, atmospheric, slowed down elements that are on this album, and then you have tracks like Calling You Back that are just a little bit more pop, you could say. Like they just infuse the album with a little bit more energy. Track 3 is Hush. This one actually was released as a single before the album came out, so I have heard this song previously, and this one just really impressed me when they released it as a single. I love how minimalistic this track is, and yet it has this great bass line to it. It just has great rhythm, and yet sonically there's not a ton going on. It's very minimalistic, but I like that. It works really well. And there's overall just kind of a very moody, you could almost say seductive sound to this track. Vocals are in a lower register. It's just a really interesting one. But I just love overall how this track has kind of this slower feeling to it, but then you have that bass that just again infuses a little bit of energy into this song. It mixes the two really well. Track 4, All I Really Want Is You, is also a standout for me. This one is so relaxing. It's like a lullaby. It just puts you in a trance, like kind of a dreamlike state. It's got this really cool kind of slight echoiness to the vocals, which add to that whole dreamlike feeling that this song gives off. Honestly, this whole album gives off that feeling. And there's also some jazzy bits that are kind of muffled sounding. It's a really interesting track, but just very relaxing, gorgeous to listen to. Definitely one of the standouts for me. Track 5, Hable con ella, is a short little track. It's like 30-second song. It's just, you could say it's a little interlude, and it's just got these little jazzy bits going on. It carries that sound through from the previous track, and it kind of has like a nice Spanish flair to it too with its sound. Track 6, Little by Little, is another example of how just absolutely smooth this album is. This track, there's no jarring elements sonically, and it just is again so calming and relaxing to listen to. María's vocals on this whole album are absolutely gorgeous. They're again just smooth is the only adjective I can conjure up to describe it. It just flows so well, and it just goes with the instrumentals, and it creates this very atmospheric, dreamy pop sound that is gorgeous. Track 7, Heavy. This was one that I wasn't sure about when I first started listening to it. And then around the halfway point into this track, there's kind of an upswelling sound to the vocals and just the overall sound of this track. And I ended up loving it. So it kind of took a turn. I also love the bass on this track. It's so good. This one especially, I kind of just felt like I was floating in some sort of dreamland. They kind of have that effect on me on this whole album, but there's certain tracks where I especially notice it, and Heavy is one of them. Millón is definitely one of the more upbeat tracks on this album. Again, this one came out as a single a while back. This one is super catchy. I love the Spanish vocals too. It's kind of what you come to expect from the Marías. It's like their trademark. It's just what makes them that much more unique as a band, that they blend English and Spanish vocals so seamlessly well together. But yeah, Millón is a great track. Again, it still has those same dreamy sounds to it. It's just a little bit more upbeat. It's very danceable. Track 9, Spin Me Around, just has this very languid, like you're in the summer afternoon heat vibe to it. It's kind of slow, like molasses, but in a really, really good way. And yeah, there's just kind of this drawn out, relaxed feel to it. The Mice Inside This Room, track 10, is a really interesting one. This one, I think, sonically is one of the slightly more different tracks on this album. There's just some really cool, slightly different sounds. There's distorted vocals at moments, which is kind of interesting. However, it's still very relaxing. They keep that throughout the whole album. This kind of dreamy, relaxed state they keep you in. It's like a trance almost. And they retain that on this track, even though there's some different sonical stuff going on. Track 11, To Say Hello, is definitely one of my favorites on this whole album. This one's beautiful. I love how the verses on this one are a little more melodic, and then the chorus swells up and it just kind of brings a little bit more sound to the track. Again, just a great meshing of kind of that slight danceability factor, but very melodic and slowed down too. And also, again, I love the blending of the English and the Spanish vocals on this track. And there's also something kind of sad or melancholy sounding about this one. Fog as a Bullet is definitely one of the more minimalistic, very calmed down, subdued tracks on this album. Again, it continues with kind of those jazzy elements, but in a very restrained way. It's a little bit more on the acoustic side. It's just a very soft track. And again, with the Spanish vocals, it just works so well. It flows really nicely, and it's just a very, very beautiful track to listen to. And then the closing track on this album is track 13, Talk to Her. This one also is kind of a little bit different for this album. It's mostly just talking set to instrumentals, which is just interesting. I wasn't expecting it, but it works well. Actually, I kind of enjoyed this track, and it grew on me the more I listened to it. Again, very reminiscent of being in a dream. It's got that dreamlike state to it. Yeah, just a very interesting track. The talking goes really well with the instrumentals. Like I said, I was kind of unsure of this one at first, but it's definitely grown on me with more listens. But definitely a very fitting end to this album. There's something kind of cinematic about it. It kind of sounds like the ending of a dream or the ending of a story being told. So there you have it. That is going to wrap up my little review video on Cinema, the newest album from the indie pop band the Marías. Like I said, this album is very, very new. It was just released on June 25th of this year. So I definitely need to listen to it more. I've only listened to it 3 times so far, but I am loving all of the tracks on it. I think it's a fantastic album. I think right now, if I had to say my favorites, they would be Calling You Back, All I Really Want Is You, and To Say Hello. Those are my top 3 tracks right now. But yeah, this album is awesome. Definitely in the running for one of my favorite albums of 2021 so far. I have really nothing to fault this album for. Definitely go check it out if you have not heard it already. If you have listened to it, let me know what your favorite song from this album is. And yeah, as usual, thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned, and I will see you in the next video.